You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host and bourbon-soaked storyteller, Juliette Miranda.
Hey there, y'all. I'm Juliette Miranda, and this is episode 128 of the Unwritable Rant podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Studio. This is a lifestyle brand that makes premium headphones with studio-quality sound and classic Scandinavian design. Their headphones and earbuds are the perfect combination of style and tech. If you want to check out what Studio has, just head on over to their website, studio.com. That's SUDIO.com. And if you like what you see, enter the code RANT during checkout and you will get 15% off your purchase. And bonus, they offer free shipping worldwide. So y'all, I have just one story for you today, but it is an epic adventure about deception and freedom and rock and roll. But first, bourbon. I'm going to pour myself a glass of Blanton single barrel bourbon. Cheers, y'all. I love this bourbon. It is from the Buffalo Trace family, who unfortunately do not disclose their mash bills. But it is assumed that this bourbon is about 15% rye. Now, I go into a full explanation about how this bourbon was made in my last bourbon tasting video. So if you want the full story, and you do, it's very cool. There's lots of little details about this bourbon. Check the video out on YouTube. What I will say right here is that this bourbon is just hands down wonderful. It's balanced and smooth and full of vanilla and almond flavors. And then you get the perfect punch of spice from the rye. This bourbon is a little tricky to find, so if you see a bottle of it, snatch it up. Trust me, you will love it. So Ferris Bueller's Day Off was on TV the other night. I don't know how you feel about this movie, but for as much as I like it, it always kind of annoys me. It's not that I find the movie itself to be a problem. It's that in watching these hokey kind of challenges that Ferris faces, stuff like, beating his parents home or making a reservation at a restaurant, I kind of just have to roll my eyes. And I'm thinking, give me a break. Ferris had it way too easy. And I feel absolutely justified in saying this. Because back when I was a junior in high school, my girlfriend and I pulled off our very own Ferris Bueller-style adventure, and it was epic. Oh, epic and awful. For this story, I'll call my girlfriend Texas. She was the smartest of all of my friends. A bold, brash, give zero fucks kind of girl who could quote Kurt Vonnegut, play flawless Beethoven on the cello, and hotwire a car. She added a bit of well-needed levity to my wild whims, while still being capable of doing damage in her own right. We were an excellent match. And on one Thursday night in early March, she and I concocted a flimsy, hole-ridden plan to skip school the next day and head to Milwaukee to see a local band that I liked play some shitty dive bar. Skipping school and faking out our parents really was pretty easy. Texas and I were pretty good students and allegedly trustworthy young adults, and these things have advantages when it comes to mischief. But the getting to Milwaukee and finding a place to spend the night parts were a bit trickier. For starters, neither of us had a car. Now, what Texas didn't know in all of this was that I was harboring a major thing for the guitar player. And that, above everything else, was my main motivation in this whole escapade. It wasn't scoring beer. It wasn't writing an article for the local paper about the band, although that did make a convenient cover. I just craved the guitarist. Oh, he was everything a hairband guitar player should be. Smoldering, stacked, and just a little bit stupid. We'd been flirting lightly the past couple of times we saw each other. So my hope was that he would invite us to spend the night at his place, Texas, wherever, and me in his bed. But even in my hormone-driven condition, I knew we couldn't count on the guitar player for much of anything. Musicians at their best, particularly those of the local variety, aren't known for their reliability. So I called the opposite of a musician for help. I called a roadie. His name was Salamander. He was the equivalent of a male groupie in that he followed this band around to all of their gigs, but he made himself useful by lugging gear and fetching pitchers of beer. And since he didn't ask for any money, the band had no problem keeping him around. Salamander was eager to give Texas and I a hand. A little too eager, now that I think about it. Although in a totally sketchy and legally questionable way, that did kind of work to our advantage. You see, he was over 21, and we were under 21. Which I told him, I fully explained that. Just how far under 21, or under 18, as was the case, I didn't exactly let on. Because here's my one Ferris Bueller-style tip for you in all of this. Only lie to your advantage, never beyond your means. Texas and I could easily pull off 19 or 20. Anything above the legal drinking age was a little bit more challenging to prove. And yeah, we had fake IDs, but they only looked passable from a distance and in the dark. If Salamander thought there was anything odd about driving 100 miles, oh yeah, 100 miles both ways, to pick up two underage girls at an Illinois diner at 8:30 on a Friday morning, he didn't say a word about it. He just showed up, an hour late. And that alone was almost enough to make Texas consider turning back. We were trying our best to not look conspicuous, or like prostitutes, standing at the outskirts of the parking lot waiting for Salamander. Our high school was only a few blocks away, and it was just a matter of time before one of the security staff showed up to do a sweep of the students from the diner. Texas sits down on the curb and lights a cigarette. The early March sun was weak and not especially encouraging, as we stared at the road hoping the next car to pull in would be for us. She is clearly having second thoughts. Hell, I was having second thoughts, but I wasn't about to let on. I give Texas my most confident smile, and I start blathering about all of the fun we'll have drinking beer, not having a curfew, flirting with hot band guys. You know, all of the things important to teenage girls back then. She probably didn't buy a word of that. But it didn't really matter because Salamander had just rattled up in his shaky but functional Ford Escort. He was something of a doughy guy who clearly did not see sunlight that often. Or soap. His colorless hair fell in greasy streaks down his back, and the pits of his Skid Row t-shirt were permanently stained. He also had a mustache. A bristly, sparse mustache that he would occasionally touch with his fingertips, kind of as if he was trying to make sure it was still there. He has a giant Coke Slurpee crammed in the cup holder of his car, which he graciously offers us sips from once we get back on the road. And you can practically see the cooties crawling out of it. So Texas and I both politely decline. To be fair to Salamander, what he lacked in desirability, he made up for in chattiness, which made the 90-minute drive to Milwaukee far more entertaining than it could have been. But while Texas may have been feeling a little bit better about our situation, my own discomfort was growing. Salamander had the unnerving habit of squeezing my leg whenever he liked something I had to say, which was pretty much every other sentence. Now, at first, it just seemed kind of friendly, so I didn't think a lot about it. But by the time we'd crossed the border, he was accompanying each grope with a twitchy sort of wink and a filmy smile. So with each passing mile, I am pressing myself closer and tighter against that car door until I'm practically hanging out the window. I didn't want to be rude to the guy. I mean, after all, he was doing us a favor. But I also didn't want his fingerprints on me. Fortunately, it wasn't that much longer before he pulled up to his house. Actually, I should clarify that a little bit because it wasn't his house. It was his mom's house. And she was waiting for us at the front door. She just runs out of the house before we're even out of the car, wraps her arms around me and then Texas in a way too friendly hug, and then she says, "Oh, my dears, it is so wonderful to meet you. I've heard so much about you." Really? Because I'd known Salamander for all of about 4 days, and I'd talked to him twice. Salamander, meanwhile, is pretending to be embarrassed by her untoward affection, but he is clearly proud to have brought home not one, but 2 prize girls home for his mom to meet. I'm guessing this was a first at his house. Mrs. Salamander leads us into the house and takes us for a mini tour. Kitchen, powder room, the living room. She motions to the couch and explains it opens into a sofa. But then she says, "Since we're all adults here, I won't say a word about your sleeping arrangements." You can just hear the weird little wink in her voice. And again, Salamander's standing there going, "Oh, Mom, cut it out." He takes Texas and I by the hands and leads us into his bedroom at the back of the house. The only place to sit is the bed. So Texas and I immediately get comfortable on the floor. This appears to annoy Salamander just a little bit, but he puts on a gracious face anyway and asks if he can get us some snacks. We were not hungry, but we needed a break from his slimy presence, so we sent him off to the kitchen to have a quick conference. Texas gives my shoulder a quick slap and she says, "Just how well do you know this guy? And what the hell kind of deal did you make with him?" I did not like her tone. All I'd told Salamander was that we needed a ride and a place to crash. I hadn't offered up either of our bodies in exchange. I mean, geez, I wasn't Crazy Town. Sure, the guy was a little awkward, but he really seemed harmless enough. It was fine. It was fine. Totally fine. Besides, we could always ditch him when we got to the club. Salamander returns, and he spreads out a little picnic for us on the floor. There's cheese, crackers, and several child-sized boxes of raisins that he gallantly opens up and dumps in a sticky pile at the center of the tray. Texas visibly try-heaves, but I make myself a tiny sandwich and stuff it into my mouth as if to say, "See, nothing creepy or odd here." And as we snack, Salamander begins to outline his plans for our afternoon. He wants to start by playing the entire series of King's Quest graphic adventure games for us. He's all, "Oh, it's even better than a movie because you can control the action." He looks so genuinely earnest about this that I don't have the heart to tell him I conquered the first 3 King's Quest games back in the 80s. Mostly, though, I just figured that having his hands on the keyboard would keep them occupied. Lord, was I ever wrong. He arranges 2 chairs next to his in front of his hulking IBM computer. And then he proceeds to demonstrate amazing dexterity in simultaneously pulling the keyboard and our legs like some kind of nerdy Caligula. I glance at Texas and I see she is biting back venom. So I nicely but firmly take his hand and put it on his desk. He gets that pouty, annoyed look and returns to the game, but it's not long before his hand is inching back over to Texas. When she moves his hand this time, he says, "What the hell? This is my room." And then Texas is all, "What the hell? It's my leg." Salamander then begins to explain righteously and without a trace of shame that because he has gone out of his way to help us, at least one of us should be happy to return the favor. And then he says, "We don't have to go all the way, just third base." Oh, well, gee, that's a relief, you creepy fuck. Texas grabs her bag and she says to me, "Hey, you can do what you want, but there is no way I am spending the night in this horror movie." I was glad she had the lady balls to say that, because Lord knows how long I would have stayed, or what I would have put up with, just so that we could get to the club later. She and I sprint out of the house, and he is quick to follow, and he's yelling, "If you leave, you're on your own." Meanwhile, his mother is quick on his heels, and she's yelling, "Girls, wait, what happened? Don't go! We dash down the block and round the corner, and we are laughing our asses off the whole way. That was a close one, it was. I mean, had we stayed any longer, I have no doubt we would have wound up sister wives or worse. So we slow our pace and we look around. Salamander and his mom lived just off the lake on the east side, which we guessed meant that downtown Milwaukee and the club were, with any luck, at least a mile or two ahead of us. And if we could just get to that club, we would be fine. At least, that's what I hoped. And now, y'all, if you will hold, please, I'm going to have a little bit of bourbon. Yum. So don't forget, y'all, when you have a minute, check out studio.com. Their headphones are making recording this podcast an absolute joy because I don't have to fiddle with them. These things look great, they sound great, and they fit great. And I don't know if y'all will care about this, but I do. They're also available in pink. Truly, y'all, studio.com has some amazing headphones. They're gorgeous, and you will love them. And if you are so inclined to make a purchase, you can get 15% off when you use the code RANT at checkout. That's SUDIO.com. So now, y'all, if you will recall, Texas and I are stranded in Milwaukee. Now, here's the thing about Milwaukee. It is cold as balls. It is. Chicago can be literally melting under the sun. But when you head north to the Milwaukee lakefront, you'll be cracking icicles off of your eyelashes. Texas and I are huddled next to each other as we walk, and we're sharing a cigarette for warmth. I had actually quit smoking the previous year, but I was willing to risk an asthma attack if it meant taking the edge off that cold. So we're walking, and 45 minutes or so pass, and we still feel no closer to the club than when we started. Frustration and fear are kicking in. I mean, we'd both stopped talking altogether, and I suspect Texas was a heartbeat away from finding a payphone, calling a cab, and leaving me there on the side of the road. And I would not have blamed her. So I launch into another one of my desperation tap dances, and I'm trying my best to pep us both up. I keep saying, I'm sure the club isn't far now. Don't worry. This will all work out. And then, like magic, a van pulls up next to us. It was, by all definitions, a rape van. It was tall and wide, and what few windows it did have were very darkly tinted. So the passenger window rolls down, and a voice calls out, "Hey, need a ride?" I peer in, and I see that the van is being driven by an older guy. He's a little weathered and wearing coveralls, but the interior looks clean enough. At least, I don't see any bottles of booze or tubes of lube rolling around in there. So I grab the door handle and I say, "Yes, please." Texas grabs my arm and she's all, "Are you nuts?" Probably. But here is how I rationalized hitchhiking to my cold and unamused friend. It's broad daylight. We'll be fine. I realize now that I didn't exactly give Texas much choice but to follow me into the rapey van. And today, I do feel bad about that. But at the time, all I could see was the shirtless chest of that guitar player. And if it took hitchhiking in a van that could easily contain our lifeless bodies, so be it. Texas takes shotgun this time, and I sit in the back between stacks of boxes labeled only as meat. So we merge back onto the road, and we're heading in what we can only cross our fingers and hope is the right direction. I see that Texas has her hand wrapped around the door handle and appears to be taking silent inventory of every landmark we pass. The driver is quiet and thankfully not gropey, although he does keep eyeing his rear mirror every few minutes, presumably to make sure I am not poking in his meat boxes. Really, the only sounds come from Texas, who will every few blocks make random announcements like, "They're expecting us at the club," and "I have a black belt in karate." Her words are so choked that you would swear Texas had Tourette's. which probably would have been preferable, because then I wouldn't have had to give the driver a "sorry, my friend thinks you're a murderer" smile when he dropped us off at the club without so much as a bite mark or STD. Now, the club was closed, but that didn't surprise us, since it was only about 4 o'clock. Fortunately, there was a McDonald's across the street where we could regroup and wait for the band to arrive to soundcheck. And for the first time since that morning, I was actually feeling hopeful. It's funny what a pile of French fries and hormones can do for your morale. Sure, we no longer had a place to sleep, but I was confident that once the guitar player and I connected further than a hug, that problem would be solved. So we're hanging out and we're talking and just feeling good about everything that's going on, until I look out the window and see that there, across the parking lot, was fucking Salamander helping the guitarist pull an amp out of his truck. Damn it. I nudge Texas and point in his direction, and her happy fast food glow sours as her shoulders slump forward. She's starting to get that "let's just find a way home" look, but I refuse to accept it. We are going to have the best goddamn night of our lives if it kills me. We wait until Salamander disappears into the club, and then approach the guitar player at his truck. If he seemed slightly less enthusiastic to see me, I didn't notice. I just gave him my best full-body hug, introduced him to Texas, who was posing as my photographer for the night, and let him lead us into the club, thus saving us from having to flash our shitty fake IDs at the door. Salamander sees us inside, and he looks as though he had half hoped we had been hit by a bus on the way over. Thanks, dude, the feeling is mutual. Texas and I do our best to stay out of his way. Instead, we set up camp at a table near the soundboard, ordered a pitcher of Budweiser, and got ready to finally have some fun. And for that first hour or two, we had a blast. The beer was cold, the room was warm, and the guitarist had left his shirt unbuttoned. The rest of the band eventually arrived, and we watched them soundcheck before helping them polish off a large pizza and more beer. Salamander just stood off to the side looking pouty. But I put him out of my mind, and I put my focus directly on the guitarist. He had vanished backstage to restring his guitar, which gave me the opportunity to trail after him like a tapeworm. This was something I was notorious for doing back then. I would get up under the guise of using the bathroom, and then vanish for an hour, or most of the night, while I pursued some stupid musician. My poor friend, and that would usually be Texas, would be left alone and often forced to contend with a progressively drunk and unruly crowd, and hating me the whole time. I find my guitar god in the back, and I insert myself directly between him and his instrument. My full-on seduction mode kicks into high gear. What can I say? I was young and dumb, and absolutely consumed with what I was certain was irresistible allure. The guitarist tries to gently pry me off of his chest, but suddenly I am no better than Salamander, and I am just trying my hardest to stuff that allure right down his throat. He shows better judgment than I would ever have credited him with, and he starts to back away. Although not because he thought I was underage. Turns out, Salamander had convinced him we were essentially betrothed. Oh yeah. My jaw drops and I start to retch slightly at the thought. And then I laugh because, seriously, me and Salamander? Ugh, no way. But the guitar player doesn't really buy it, and he looks a little embarrassed and he explains, well, look, he really digs you, and so it just wouldn't be right if you and I hooked up. I roll my eyes and I'm all, yeah, he likes me so much he kicked me and my friend out of his house, which means we have no place to crash tonight. And then I look expectantly at the guitar player. And this now former king of my fantasies, who is so committed to his faux friendship with a guy that he treats like a lackey, says, well, I don't think it's a good idea if you stay with me. Oh, God, really? I am about to haul off and slug him because, seriously, way to be an upstanding guy. I don't care now if he doesn't want to sleep with me. I just want somebody to put us up for the night. How hard is that? And maybe he sees that on my face, or maybe he just has a change of heart, because he says, look, I guess you guys can crash at our rehearsal space. I think a few other people will be too. All right, fine. That's better than the streets. I flounce out of the room, and I am feeling dejected and disgusted, and really longing for a beer. Texas is still sitting at the table, and I start to tell her what happened, but we both start speaking at the same time, and we say the exact same thing. Do you know what Salamander did? I go first, and I explain that Salamander had cock-blocked me. Texas just laughs. You think that's bad? She shows me the empty beer pitcher and says, that seedy little pig ratted us out to the owner. We can stay for the show, but the bartenders have all been ordered to not serve us. No beer, no booze, not even a Coke. She and I stare at each other, and we're both a little surprised that Salamander could so effectively screw us both over, all for not agreeing to round third base with him. So much for our glorious night of parent-free abandon. I tell you, this adulting thing fucking sucked. So we did the only thing that two teenage girls can do in a situation like this. We waited for the band to take the stage, and we danced. We took over that dance floor and gyrated, grooved, and stomped for 3 solid hours. And for those 3 hours, we felt free. There's no better feeling in the world than being 17 and dancing to rock and roll away from your parents' eyes and knowing that you managed to get exactly where you were not supposed to be, all on your own. After the show, everybody is starting to filter out of the club, and that leaves Texas and I just sitting there wondering how the hell we're going to get to the band's rehearsal studio, or even where it was. And that's when we're approached by a guy who introduces himself as Jack. He had the keys to the band's rehearsal studio and an eye patch. Lord, can one thing in our night just come without a side of sketchiness? I'm about to lose it. And Texas can see this. She could see the hesitation on my face and the frustration, because to that point, I had done nothing but lead us both down one dirty, rodent-ridden back alley after another. And I wasn't sure I could take responsibility for another bad decision. So she squeezes my arm, and she says, just because he only has one eye doesn't make him a bad person. It just means he has shitty peripheral vision. And this is exactly why Texas and I are friends to this day. We joined Jack for an impromptu and completely respectful slumber party at the band's rehearsal warehouse. Sure, it didn't have any toilet paper, but at the very least, we were safe. And better yet, Jack drove us home the next day, one eye and all, even buying us a dozen donuts along the way. Our parents and school were never the wiser. So in 24 hours, Texas and I had dodged groping hands, walked the entire length of Milwaukee, were denied booze, sex, toilet paper, and even took our chances on a wannabe pirate. And all we had to show for it was a half-eaten box of donuts. But in looking at Texas on the way home, and knowing that we were sharing the same wild sort of smile, I had a feeling we would both do it all over again. I doubt Ferris Bueller could do the same. Well, y'all, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Unwritable Rant podcast. Head on over to theunwritablerant.com to sign up for my newsletter, check out back episodes, and find our merch store. And I'm so excited, y'all. It'll be just a couple more days, maybe a week, before we have those Unwritable Rant flasks in. Now watch for the announcement, because as soon as those flasks are available, we're also going to be announcing a super cool contest. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. And now, y'all, I'm going to head on out, find some more bourbon, and, find some more fodder for more bourbon-soaked stories. I'll be back next Sunday to chat with y'all some more. Cheers.
Go to theunwritablерant.com and sign up to get early access to interviews and new videos. And don't forget to connect with Juliette on Twitter at Morning Neurosis.
Girl, you was pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, a couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton, hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo. Sweet as taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You can be the flower on my magnolia. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this.